open spaces in our area. Yay! And so when Orsi suggested gardening for pollinators, I said, yeah. Okay.
So, was that, so I'm a mycologist by education, and I've been doing landscaping for 15-ish years. I'm an arborist, I'm not an entomologist, so if you have really specific bug questions, I probably won't be able to answer that. I love, I enjoy looking at the insects that move into our yard and any other yard that I've been managing, so I can help you with, I'm a big picture person. I look at the holistic of gardening, tree care, anything else I do. So I'm more looking at the big picture and not the tiny little what exactly that insect is. The other thing is insects are really difficult to identify. So anybody says it otherwise, they're lying. Especially even bumblebees that are big and so colorful, and you might think that like they would be easy. They're really difficult because they're so variable, and like flies, you have to get them under the microscope and look at the hair in different body parts. So I'm not going there. I'm going like the big picture. I'm not going to details. The other thing that I want to just bring up at the beginning and then maybe at the end is like, whatever we do in gardening, if we're doing something great for pollinators or any kind of insect, anything that we do for pollinators will be great for other insects and other bugs that are not insects, but good bugs and birds as well as any other wildlife. So pollinator garden will be a nice wildlife habitat for lots of other things. So this is basically just the outline of what I'm talking about today. Go on the other side. How do I not stand? Who are the pollinators? So what insects or bugs we're talking about, or birds? What do they need to thrive? And how can we support them? And what are resources where we can learn more about how to do it that I can't teach you in an hour? And this is a white avens, which is a really just a weed that showed up in my garden, and I let it be, and it's been spreading, and I like it. And the little bee, this particular bee you can recognize because it has the hair where they collect the pollen on the underside instead of on the legs that you typically find the other things. So that's why the feminine name that I can't pronounce, or the way I pronounce it won't be the same as anybody else. So pollinators, there are a lot of different pollinators. There could be the typical, obviously, are the bees because they're the fuzziest and they collect a lot of pollen on their backs and bellies and legs. And that's where the loose pollen is the one that goes into the next flower, and that's the one that pollinates flowers. But so there's all different kinds of bees, different sizes. Wasps can pollinate. There's different kind of beetles, butterflies, obviously, and even flies. So it's not just bees, although the bees are probably the most effective in pollinating because of the fuzziness of their bodies. And then just look at like what do they need. Obviously, food, which is kind of the thing that most people really think about, is you need to plant flowers, and we always think of flowers in like perennial gardens. And I want to talk about a lot of other things besides just that, because it's just a big, little picture, and we need lots of other things too. We need shelter, nesting sites where they can raise their babies, protection from insecticides.
Don't mind
Oh,
that.
that's
I was trying to keep the glare off.
Yeah, it doesn't, yeah,
It's not sticking, so.
I guess we turned the lights off enough that it's.
Yeah, it's okay.
cute.
I think you can
Thank
still
you.
see it.
Yeah. Hopefully nobody will fall asleep, but, and advocates that you need to advocate for just habitat. So first off, we need food, but it's not just one kind of food. We probably wouldn't like to eat the same thing every day either. We want diversity, different plants, different type of plants, different sizes, shapes, colors, different families. You're familiar with the aster family? Those are the asters, the sunflowers, the coneflower. Cabbage family, they have the cross-shaped flower. Crucifer is one of the other name for the family. Legume, oops, parsley family, and I'm gonna show pictures of all these, mint, milkweed, etc. So different families are visited by different insects. We also need abundant flowers throughout the year. And some of the pollinators might be really specific to certain flowers. There are bees that only pollinate one flower, like the spring beauty that's blooming right now. There's one bee that, actually, I think the adult bees collect pollen from other plants too, but the babies are only fed by the pollen collected on one specific plant. Or sometimes it's a small group of plants. So they can be really specific, similar to the monarchs, can be specific to eating milkweeds and nothing else. So we want to have, and it varies, some bees and some pollinators can visit lots of different flowers and they don't really care what they eat. They're unlike my child. So we want to have flowers throughout the growing season, basically anytime when it's warm and the insects can move around. We should have enough food around. So, and the other thing that we should not forget is the caterpillar host plant food, and most of these host plants are woody plants that are not considered when we're doing pollinator gardens usually. Different shaped flowers are visited by different pollinators. Bird pollinated generally is like the, they're usually red or orange. Those are like the hummingbirds visiting the red flowers. Butterfly pollinated ones are usually vivid colors. The shapes are different. These the butterfly and the bird pollinated ones have tubes. Bee pollinated plants and flowers have flat landing pads where things can land and they have the space to land there. I didn't have in this chart where I got it from, the flies, stinky flowers, like the pears that are blooming now, the invasive pears, general, and then other stinky flowers, they are usually pollinated by flies and beetles. So it's just different things like different plants. And then the same type of plant might be visited by lots of different bees. This one is a penstemon. And this is a carpenter bee. It's so big that it cannot fit into the flower, so it cheats. It goes in and pokes a hole and takes the nectar. So it's not really pollinating that flower because it doesn't even get to the pollen. It just takes it. This one is a little bumblebee, and it can kind of fit into the flower, so it can collect some of the pollen. And then I can't remember what this will be. One of the sweat bees or something, and that can get inside and turn around, and it has lots of room to just enjoy the food. So there are certain plants that are certain families that are more pollinator magnets than others. Here, this is a coneflower. You can see this bee is completely covered with the pollen. This one is a coreopsis. This one is liatris. The flower looks different, but this is an inflorescence, so it's lots of separate flowers together in one stem, so that's why it looks different than a coneflower. But each individual flower, if you look at it, it would look more similar to the coneflower. Right, mint family, a lot of plants in the mint family, even the mint that we used to make mojitos from, that's not native. A lot of pollinators love that, but a lot of other native mint family flowers and plants, median plant, ebon, mountain mint. This is mountain mint. This is just a regular mint. Lots of different pollinators visit them. So if you see that, and lavender also, even though it's not. I'm not a purist. I go by the data and the science of it. So there are a lot. It's not a black and white. I'll talk about native and non-native a little bit later. But that's why I have mint that's not a native mint. Just as an example here. Parsley family, obviously parsley would be one of it. This is Rattle St. Master, which is a very cool looking plant. This one is dill, you might recognize the flower head. This is parsley, white parsley. Those are great and different, as I said, different kind of plants are visited by somewhat different pollinators. Even vegetables can be great for pollinators, which people don't consider having the vegetable. This one, the first one is actually the flower of the asparagus. I don't know if anybody ever looked at the asparagus flower. I was weeding around and I noticed the bees going in and out, enjoying that little tiny, the flowers are really small and barely have any flower. This one is a squash bee. There are two specific bees that visit squash flowers only, and the squash opens in the morning and they close pretty quickly, so they have to go in there and pollinate the flowers in that short amount of time. And then that was cabbage, the last one. So as you see, like very different size, different kinds of bees and different plants. Weeds. Sometimes I feel bad reading patch of yard because there are so many things that we think that we're doing a great thing for growing other plants, but there are lots of weeds that are basically just native plants or maybe not native plants that will provide food for bees. And having just a feel I was just teaching a sustainable garden class a couple days ago. If we have just individual plants and lots of mulch and clear all the other plants and not a lot of variety, you're not gonna have this. And some of these weeds are tiny, some of them, none of them are really ornamental, but the bees don't really care. This one is called a mask bee. You can see they're small and they have this yellow shape on their faces. Some of them have larger yellow covering that kind of look like a mask. And this is actually Indian tobacco is related to cardinal flower. So if you think that that flower looks familiar, that's why it is. It's just teeny tiny, but it's the same. It basically looks like a miniature cardinal flower, just white. Galleon saga, it's a non-native weed. It's weed. Yep, they're really, the bees don't care. And this is a nightshade, and that's generally pollinated, same thing as tomato. They're pollinated by bumblebees, and they need to do their honey dance and shake to be able to pollinate because the pollen is so strongly attached to the flowers that if they just brush against it, it's not going to be as large. So they have to have bumblebees have a specific way of pollinating, the bus pollinating, and that's why they can pollinate the nightshade family, which tomatoes are part of. So diversity, as I said, if we want to have all sorts of different things, partly to have food source throughout the year, partly to be able to cater to all different picky eaters or not picky eaters. Let's talk about a little bit about trait species or cultivar. And there's a lot of buzz about native plants. We should only plant native plants. As I showed, there's some other plants that are not native and they're still visited by pollinators. Are you all familiar with Doc Tony's work? So Doc Tony has, I don't know, 4 or 5 books. He's
Oak trees.
Yeah, there's a.
Can you spell it?
Talamy, T-A-L-O.
Talamy, Dr. Talamy.
Yeah. So he has several books about, he's really promoting native plants and his research shows, but he specifically researches caterpillars, and his research shows that you have to have 70% of your yard or whatever, the area, 70% native plants to be able to sustain a brood of chickadees. Because chickadees and a lot of other birds feed their young mainly on caterpillars because it's a soft food, it's a baby food, and it's easy to digest, full of protein. So you have to have the large percent of native plants to be able to support those birds. And a lot of the birds, even if the adults feed on seeds, the babies are fed by caterpillars mostly for soft body. So it's really important to plant natives, and if you have, most yards probably have way more non-natives than natives, so you might just kind of, I don't suggest anybody go home and just rip out everything and start over, but over time, you might try to edit out the non-natives, especially if they're invasive plants, and just plant more natives. These are dahlias, they're not native plant, but you can see actually the bees love this one because it has lots of pollen, you can see from the picture. If you have cultivars that have lots of like funny shape or double flowers, like the roses have the double flowers, or cornflowers sometimes have like some cultivars that have like lots of petals and stuff, the uh, pollen there, then that will not provide as much food for pollinators than the. So the more wilder looking the little plant is or flower is, like a wild rose as opposed to the cultivated rose, there's the cultivated rose doesn't really provide much food. The wild plants do. So that's one thing. If you're planting cultivar, just pay attention. Try to not put too many of the things that look like the puffy one. Same thing for hydrangeas. The mop head hydrangeas, they really don't provide anything. The Annabelle native hydrangea doesn't really provide for pollinators. The flat lace cap ones do. So it's just a shape of it. This one is the leaf color. So these are the few things that are really shown in studies that make a difference in cultivar or straight species plants that are not cultivated selections. So one is the double flower, the other one is the leaf color. Leaf color makes a big difference, and insects don't like the purple leaf. The purple leaf, it comes, do you want to sit down? The purple leaf is, the color comes from a compound that is designed for the plants to provide protection from herbivores. So the more purple there is, the bitter, tart, whatever, it doesn't taste good for insects, so they're gonna avoid it. So if you're planting specifically for supporting your insects, do not plant purple or red or any other funny colored plants. Plants wanna be green, and that's what nature intended. The other colors are kind of just a mistake in that regard. I personally don't like the really dark colored ones. I think they're nice for maybe for planters, but really in the landscape, they just kind of.
Can I just ask a clarification? So you're saying like the dahlias, they're broad, lots of petals, but not a lot of pollen?
Yeah.
Versus where this has a lot of little flowers
Yes.
and more pollen? Okay.
Because when during the selection, those are that produce the pollen, those turn into petals. So you have less of the pollen producing parts of the flower.
Okay.
Like zinnias, when they are all filled up.
Yes, zinnia, the same thing. So any other color cornflower, anything, yours is the same. So I'm not saying you should not plant anything double, but just the proportions, like plant, if your goal is to provide for pollinators, just pay attention to the proportions. I'm not a purist, and I'm not telling anybody what to do in their yard. So this is clever. So we're usually thinking of pollinator plants as like perennials, but there are a lot of shrubs that are also great for pollinators. This is summer sweet, Clethra, and that's kind of probably the video, but you can see there's a lot of buzzing around. There's lots of things moving around, all different sizes. So, and this is one of my favorite plants to begin with. This tolerates hard shade, the sun, as long as it's not extremely dry or soggy wet. And it has, like that's a carton there. There's a,
What is it? What's it called again?
it's summer sweet. Clethra is the scientific name.
Summer sweet.
Summer sweet. So that's a great one. It's a really fragrant.
It's like a butterfly bush, but that look of the other day.
Yes, it's a really great, and it has a really nice golden, fall colored piece, so it just looks gorgeous in the fall as well. So these next couple of slides just kind of go through the season, and so these are the flowers, some of the flowers that bloom early in the spring. These are all native, they're right in my side yard. The white flower that looks like a daisy, that's Robin's plantain is the name, but it could be anything that if you can have flowers bloom throughout the year is basically the goal. That's a white geranium, it's a native plant, but they bloom early. Golden ragwort is the yellow one on top. And then phloxes, woodland phloxes, so they bloom much earlier than the garden phlox that blooms in like July, August.
These are all native.
Except for the variegated leaf one, that's a dogwood, that's not native. I put it in a while ago, I was not as selective.
Are those the ones with the red stems?
Yeah. This one is a Plymouth Heritage Trail. I don't know if you walked by. We redid the bed, I guess 2 years now, maybe 2 years ago. And there was a lot of invasives, so we tried to pick things that would be like robust and can fend for themselves. But some of my favorite plants here is the penstemon. It's the white one that I have several pictures of it throughout the presentation. I really like that plant. It's just a great plant for May, June for pollinators. The heucheras, they're very past their prime here. Another example of a flower or plant that has tiny flowers and not very ornamental, but the insects don't really care. There's lots of different bees. I could count it at least 4 or 5, maybe more different kinds of tiny little bees visiting the plant. And heucheras, the coral bells are usually planted for their foliage, their leaf color, lots of different ones. The flowers are great. Another that's the evening primrose, is here yellows and coreopsis. And June, this is my meadow strip right in front of my house. There's butterfly weed is the orange, there's coreopsis. I'm not sure what else. Oh, the poppy mallow is the really hot pink one, which is technically it's not native. I guess nativeness, it really depends on how you define native. So it could be native to the US, it could be native to Pennsylvania, it could be native to the East Coast, or however, based on your specific criteria. So poppy mallow is not technically native here, but pollinators like it. So I'm kind of going in my garden selections with things that might likely they fit into the ecosystem that's here. So if there's something that eats it or some pollinators that use it, then I think it has a space for it in the garden. This one is Liatrius, the different kind of I showed before, coreopsis, and that's a rattlesnake master that I had another picture earlier. It's a really fun looking flower, and tiny little bees love it. So tend to be that like the smaller flowers have smaller bees, not necessarily, but that's like a lot of really small flowers that we don't even plant because we don't think of it. You have lots and lots of little bees on. And July, this is a sunflower, and the Liatrius has a really long bloom time. Mountain mint is a great plant. It smells great. It smells really minty if you just walk by or brush against it. Lots of different things love it. Butterflies, bees, wasps. It's probably one of the best. If you're only planting one thing, that might be the one. It gets tall and it's really spread. So plant it somewhere where you don't mind it spreading, or plan on pulling out the extras. And this is what it looks like with the coneflowers mixed in. So it's a really tall, like 3-4 feet. And then later in this summer, of course, the goldenrods are the season. I think I have 5 different kinds of goldenrods, 4 or 5 in this strip, and then the rudbeckias blooming at the same time, and some asters, it's the white asters. And then this is late October, and you have different kind of asters. So asters, there's lots of different kinds. There's tiny little white ones. Those are the heath asters here. They are visited by smaller bees generally. And then Hellenistic aromatic ester is the light lavender that's just started to bloom, and they're visited by other plants. And then there's nectar elsewhere, not just in the flower, but there's some certain plants produce nectar outside the flowers just as a defense mechanism. They attract ants and then ants will attack the plant. So this is one example. This is wild senna. And this plant gets really tall. It's for like 5-6 feet tall. And this is the nectar.
White
Nectar.
senna.
Wild senna.
senna.
Yeah. So this is a native one here. And walking around more jingle. Sweat bees, they're tiny, they get on you if you're sweaty, salty, they can sting, but most of the native bees don't sting. The ones, if you get attacked and stung by anything, that's most likely either honeybees, not really attacked, but if you get stung by anything, it's either honeybees, protecting their, because honeybees live in colonies, or yellow jackets, or maybe wild-based hornets. Anything else, most of our native bees and other insects live individual holes or individually. They don't have colonies, so they don't have anything to protect. So there's no reason for them to die or attack anybody to protect their space. So bees can sting, but they're tiny, so there's most of the things. So if anybody is really scared of pollinators or bees, you can try to educate them. I know it's not easy. I have a child who has all sorts of phobias and scared of spiders, so I know that education doesn't always work, or not quickly at least. But certainly bees are not out there, especially when they're on the flowers, because sometimes people don't want to have flowers close to the walkways or close to the entryway or whatever, where people walk by, because there might be too many bees and that might be dangerous. They actually don't mind, they just mind their own business. They're there to eat, and they're not gonna hurt anybody unless you really like trying to go after them. But even then, it's for, I've never gotten stung by any bee looking at flowers. I got stung several times when I was weeding around tree stumps and found a yellow jacket nest, and they found me first. Caterpillar host are really important. So we can, when we're talking about pollinator gardening, you can't just talk about flowers, which would feed the caterpillar, feed the butterflies, but we don't have food for caterpillars. Without caterpillars, there's no butterflies. So obviously people are more familiar with the monarch butterflies that need the milkweed, and ideally the native milkweeds. There's several different species. But different caterpillars, different butterflies need different kind of host plants, and some of them are really specific and need 1 or 2 species, just like the bees are specific to their flowers, and some of the others are not picky at all, and they might be feeding on lots of different kind of trees, for example. And this one, it's hard to see, but that is the little caterpillar. So the camouflage bluebird. Really, I had them in the garden last year, all different flowers with different color buzzes, and it's really difficult to notice them unless you stand there and you see something moving. Milkweeds, as I mentioned, they're obviously the host plants for monarch butterflies, but they also feed bees with pollen and nectar, and there's also the milkweed beetle that lives on. So one plant can serve lots of different things. You can see those little guys there with their long whiskers, long antennae. So butterfly host plants are mostly woody plants. Some of them could be a native hat. The monarchs are obviously feeding on milkweed, spice bush, swallowtail, like spice bush. We just finished blooming now. They're really early blooming shrubs that deer don't tend to eat. So if you have any property close to deer country, then you might want to find those. Black swallowtail likes the umbel flowers like dill, parsley, azizia. So dill and parsley are obviously not native, but if you see something munching, a caterpillar munching on your herbs, you probably should just let it be, maybe plant more herbs next year. I usually plant a ton of parsley in my garden and just let them eat. And dill just comes up in my garden from the seeds every year, so I don't even plant any. Zizia is a native flower, and hornbird is again a weed that it just came up in my garden one year. I was like, oh, there's a caterpillar on it, and I let it be. There's others that feed on herbaceous perennials like frigillars and violets. So maybe don't weed out all your violets. You can just let them be. I'll teach a class for the mainline school night about green mulch. I think this weekend, I can't remember, soon, in the next couple of days. So we're talking about how you can plant different things instead of mulching with the wood products that cover the soil. So you can see, I'm not gonna go through the list, but you can see there's different plants for different butterflies and different caterpillars. There's a couple of good websites. There's a website called like, I think it's butterfliesandmoth.com or something like that, that has like, you can find all the information, a lot more than I could ever provide. So here's a black swallowtail laying egg on the dill. So as I said, the dill comes up easily from seeds, you don't have to replant it. These are the different stages of the caterpillar, so they can look very different in different age, different color, and they kind of try to have color that either blend in or scare predators away. That's why they have like fun colors. Other caterpillars might have, hairy bodies. So again, that's a defense mechanism. As I said, birds like to feed on caterpillars, so caterpillars trying to figure out ways to not get eaten. And then this one, actually, this caterpillar looks like it has a disease because it has like a lot of black on it. There's several different diseases that are killing caterpillars, so not all of them make it. A lot of, just like anything else in nature, a lot of things. The babies, few of them live to be adults. And then these chrysalis locations, they could be under furniture, under chair, under leaves of plants, usually not right on the host plant. The caterpillars usually go further away and find hiding places elsewhere. So this is where like easily 10 feet or more from the leaves. And they look really nice. They kind of it's hard to notice when they're just green. This is the monarch chrysalis. It looks like a jewel. It has like this gold on it. It doesn't really show on the picture. So we provide food. We provide different kind of food for different things. We also need to provide nesting sites for them, places where they can hide, because they don't always eat. They also have to sleep. They hide from weather, or they have to go to different places. So, and how they overwinter varies by the type of insect. A lot of the bees live in abandoned burrows, hollows. A lot of them also overwinter in hollow stems. So if you have any kind of perennial stem, I'll show pictures how you can keep those to provide a place for them to overwinter. But the majority of the bees are ground nesters, and you might see them coming up early spring when some of the ground bees coming up all at once, and you have these lots of bees flying around, and people might get scared that there gets stung, but they really harm us. They're just looking for food. And they also can hide in wood piles, brush piles, and other places. Caterpillars, sometimes they overwinter, depends on the species. They might overwinter in leaf litter, so that's why it's really important to keep the leaves as much under the trees as possible, or wherever you can. Obviously not on sidewalk, on driveway. I'm trying to be realistic about where we can keep leaves, but the more leaves we can keep, the better for the soil, for insects, all different insects. Fireflies live in leaf litter also in moist condition. So if you're stripping all your leaves and leaf blow everything out, and you have just the bare soil, everywhere. That's not ideal. Some of the chrysalises can live in shrubs. They can also overwinter in rock crevices or under tree bark, sometimes as eggs. So all different stages of their life. Butterflies might, and obviously the monarchs migrate. Okay, so this was a pod that I fully neglected. I never found anything there. It's an old pod that came with the house, the concrete thing. And I put something there years ago. I never watered them. It looked really dry, I guess last year, 2 years ago. And when I went closer to water it, I saw that there's these millions of little bees flying in and out because they have all these little holes here that you can see. So I didn't really do anything. I provided some of the bees that like living in the soil. They like drier soil, not potting mix. It has to be soil that will hold the shape of the bird so the mines are not collapsing over them. But this was really by accident and I did nothing and I haven't done anything since. I just like, oh, that's my bee pot and just let them be. This one is so that's where they burrow and they put their eggs there and the next generation comes up in the spring. This one is a grass carrying wasp is the name. And I know this, I was looking at other bees that I'll probably have the picture next. And I saw this was in and out flying around. It took a while to make rounds, but it was carrying all these pieces of grass, dry grass. And this is when by the time I got a camera, figure out to take picture. And then it closed it. This was when it was kind of finished, closing up the hole. So it had laid the eggs in that tiny area, like maybe a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch hole on my house wall. I don't know how the hole got there. I don't know if it made it bigger or find it or whatever, but it just was there and I was happy to notice it. If I had not been looking at the plants right there at that half an hour, I would have missed it. Mud over and wasps can live on houses too, so there's no reason to be alarmed if you see any kind of these structures on your house necessarily. Carpenter bees do carpenter work there. They hollow wood, but they generally do that to wood that's already decaying. They're not really in a position to work on wood that's super sturdy and freshly cut wood. So if you have carpenter bees, it's the wood is ready to, it's already decaying. So you maybe just put some dead wood in general is a great thing to put in the garden. There's a lot of different wildlife can use it. So this was actually what I was looking at before I took a picture of the grass carrying wasp. And this is, I don't know if any of you recognize it, this is the one-foot daisy, the flower that has like the white flowers late in the fall. And it had a big chunk of dead wood. And I was thinking that maybe I should clean it up because it's kind of embarrassing to have such a messy yard. Occasionally, every once in a while I think of that and then sometimes I clean out, sometimes not so much. So this was the not so much because I was gonna cut these dead stalks back and then when I got closer, I saw all these little bees flying around and getting into the hollows of the stem and laying their eggs there. And that was, I guess, late summer. So I just let the stalks be and I don't really mind that there's dead parts in my yard. And once everything else starts flowering, it's not a big problem. And then this one is a silk moth. And this is what the egg casing looks like. I guess it was somebody already hatched on it that I found it at Marion. So another example of how you can leave the stalk. So when you're cutting back the garden, hopefully nobody cut it back yet. Wait, don't cut back your perennial garden in the fall. Ideally wait till late spring. We used to cut it back early in March, but now they recommend they have to be like 50-degree warm or warmer night and day to be able to cut it back. Otherwise, you're taking all those babies out and trashing them. The other thing that you can do if you can't bear looking at the dead stalks and you really don't like the messy look, which is fine, I'm not judging. You can cut plants back and you can try to cut them back as high as you're willing to leave them. So if you have 6 inches, 12 inches, 24 inches, that's great. The other thing is, so even the shorter stalk, you can have these live in the small, like the 12-inch stalk. 18 inches would be better. The other thing that you can do is you can find a place in your yard that's not your main entrance maybe, but you can hide the stalks and put them so that they will slowly decay and any insect that's living in the stalks will have a chance to catch one there. And since then, I learned that I should have put them upright as the stalks normally stay in the plants, but even, so whatever you can do, you just try to put them, this was just easier to put them there, but probably next time when I do it, I will keep them upright and just, I have 2 stakes and some strings and the stalks are staying behind all the, so these, lots of stalks came up and I had really tall perennials in front of it, so as the perennials go, they cover up their stems. And this is the front, it's a shorter meadow type planting, so there's not a lot of really tall stalks. What I do this time of the year soon enough is I'll break the stems, but I kind of break them into like 6-inch pieces, but it's dry, not after rain. And then within a month, things start growing through. So I usually just drop the stalks on the ground and let them be there, and the new growth covers it up. So I don't buy any mulch, I don't haul away stuff, it just stays, everything stays there. So you're saving work, you save money, and you save it. The other thing to think about is, as I mentioned, any diversity, anything you have more insects, you're gonna have more birds, you're gonna have lots of other things too. And this is my messy lawn. That's really mostly weeds, but it's fine. If you're gardening for wildlife, any kind of wildlife, the more leaves you can keep on site, the better. Trees don't like being in lawn. They don't really mix. So as an arborist, I advocate for getting rid of lawn everywhere as much as possible because they like very different conditions. Lawn doesn't work really well under trees, so we start butchering the trees to provide light for the lawn instead of just planting something else that will live happily under the trees. And those could be native woodland plants, native wildflowers that live naturally in wooded areas. Like here, we have different sedges. There's some other things here that are not that obvious because they're covered under the leaf. But then you can, if you don't have lawn doesn't like to be smothered by leaves. But if you have native woodland plants, they're kind of used to it. That's what they're evolved with. So you can just leave those leaves and they're gonna be happy as can be. So here, talked about how we feed them, how we provide habitat, home for the insects. I'm talking about a couple of different enemies that are, threatening these bugs, pollinators, other insects. So there's a lot of natural enemies. There's competitors. There are things that we saw same flowers are visited by some different bees, so they compete with each other. Which one gets first? And you can see if you're standing by your butterfly garden or pollinator garden, you will see that lots of bees come and they're kind of just buzzing around and visiting the same flowers, and it's like, oh, there's no pollen, then they move on and they're kind of visiting the different flowers and trying to find food. So competition is a real thing. Honeybees are not native. They basically like chicken. They're farmed animals, and they're competing with our native bees. So if you want to support your native bees, don't have honeybees. As much as I like honey, we probably have more than enough honeybees around. We don't need more. Predators, obviously you can see this is a native mantis. This is a Carolina mantis, which is a lot smaller than the Chinese one, and I've seen several of them the last couple of years, so I was really happy with that. And it got wait in the day. Bumblebee. So it was like, the bumblebee is quite big for the mantis. These mantis is very close to like half the size of the Chinese mantis, so they're not that huge. Parasites and diseases, just like anything else, plants, people, pets, everything has some kind of diseases, so they can harm, as I pointed out on that caterpillar that had some disease. So they're just something that happens and you can't really do anything about it. Neither can we do anything about weather, so you can just kind of accept that there will be some insects, some pollinators, some caterpillars will be eaten by something else or killed by something else. There's lots of different predator examples. Here's the spiders, crab spider. That was really cool. I actually stood there and watched how this thing was hiding under the petal. Like you could barely see it, and then there was this poor fly coming around and got a big hug. And then we have this wasp. Wasps are predators. They adults might eat nectar or pollen, but they feed their babies with food, meat. So they're eating, all different other bugs they're catching. And then this one that kind of looks like a corridor is an ambush bug, and it's a larvae of an ambush bug. The adult, I took that slide out actually, but looks very similar. Kind of a skeleton looking thing, but it's teeny. The nymph is tiny, the adult is a little bit bigger. Then there's parasitoids here. So this is a wedge-shaped beetle, oil beetles. I see them a lot where there's lots of bees. They're lay their eggs, and then the larvae, when they hatch, they attach to the they go to the flowers and then they attach to the bees, and then they go and then they eat the pollen or babies in the bee nest. But because we have fewer bees, then the oil beetles are declining too, so they're kind of related to it. And the second fly also is a parasite. And then there's non-native competitors, which again, it's unpleasant. We can't really do anything about it. Once the gene is out of the bottle, we can put it back. This one is a wood carder bee. They're super aggressive. I watched these guys going after carpenter bees, which are pretty, like, I don't know, 5 times bigger, 10 times bigger than these guys. And they just like ran into them and pushing them out. It's really interesting to watch. I would not want to be a carpenter bee that's getting attacked by this guy. But it's interesting. They're really territorial and they protect their side. So in May, June, when this penstemon is blooming, there's lots of buzz around them, and carder bees are really around and trying to push everybody else out. And there's a lot of other stressors that are threatening our pollinators. So these are the things that we should be able to do something about it. I don't know how hard it is. Too much fertilizer causes nitrification. There's fires, pollution, obviously, urbanization, removal of habitat, agriculture, insecticides. So there's lots of different things that we should prevent, or as much as we can influence, that would be helpful. So worry less about the diseases and more about things that we can control. A lot of it got really common to do the whole yard mosquito spraying in the last however many years, for 3-4 years. There's no mosquito and tick control that doesn't harm everything else. Whatever they say, the companies that sell those products, they're not accurate, to say it mildly. I was talking to an entomologist recently at a conference, and he said there's actually data that shows that there's a lot fewer pollinators and all sorts of insects in yards where they're being treated, but it will not be published because of the funding where the sun is coming from. So I can prove it. It's one of those things that I like having resources and, peer-reviewed articles. I can't really prove this one, but just take my word for it. So any kind of mosquito spray is not gonna be good for any other insect. There's just nothing that would be so specific to. There's specific stuff for mosquitoes, but nothing specific for ticks. The other thing that you might consider is if you're using those whole yard sprays, whatever it is, whether it's the killer insecticides or insect repellent. Well, the insecticides definitely kill everything, but it's not so effective in killing some of the insects that are harmful or bugs that are harmful. So yards that are being treated by those treatments have a lot more scale disease and they have a lot more aphids for starter because we're killing all the predators that would keep those on the check. So even if you just spray the leaves, because not spraying the flowers, although I don't think those workers really here where they're spraying, you can see that the insects are not always on the flowers. When they're resting, they're on the leaves, all different places, so they're gonna get hit. If you wanna treat mosquitoes, treat them at the source, so find any place where there's cooling water and put the mosquito dunk or the mosquito bit in there. That's really specific to mosquitoes and I think certain flies. But a lot of times, especially if you have new construction, but even as old construction, there's all these stormwater management systems where they have the grates. They're designed to trap sediment, so that means that they're also designed to trap water. And where there's cooling water, there could be mosquitoes. So it's really, if you get home, maybe walk around them this weekend and see if you have any of these. And whenever it's mosquito season, I recommend treating these with the mosquito dunk every couple of weeks, but it depends on how much rain you're getting. That's a lot more effective way. If you don't have these, but you want to kind of trap the mosquitoes, you can put out buckets with water and some straw, hay, anything, bits of leaves, and attract the mosquitoes there, and then treat that water with dunk. It's safe for pets, it's safe for anything else, you could just kill the mosquitoes, and it's basically just attract them there. And lastly, what you can do is advocate. You can have all different signs. There's lots of different organizations that support pollinator habitat. I have two something.
Can I put the dunk into the bird bath?
You should be able to. That doesn't impact anything else. It's just for the mosquitoes and the flies. So you can put mosquito dunk, DUNK. And it's the Bacillus thuringiens. It's a bacterium. That comes in a tablet form usually, or sometimes it's like a pellet, either it's a disc or it's like a pelleted form. The pellet might be easier to use for like smaller areas, and then I think that it says like how frequently you would have to put it, but it's basically a bacterium that gets into the guts of the mosquito larvae and kills larvae. Yeah. So it kills the mosquitoes at the larvae. It doesn't hurt anything else. It doesn't hurt birds. It doesn't hurt mice. It's really specific. It doesn't even hurt other beetles or other things. It's really mosquitoes and certain flies, but generally like we don't have those flies in the water that would be harmful. So that's the really good, more effective. And I'm a mosquito magnet. I can't go out to pick parsley and go back in the house in 2 minutes. I kept them alive. So that is a good method for healing. The other one is all my work clothes are treated with the insecticide, permethrin treated clothing, which you can buy online, or there's one company called Insect Shield that you can send your own clothes and they treat it, and that lasts 70 washes, I think is what they claim. And with me working outside every day all year, I usually had my clothes treated once a year, and I never had ticks, I never had mosquitoes. And this year is gonna be really ticky because we don't have winter. So we're gonna have lots of ticks. So I recommend everybody, do some kind of tick repellent, whether it's spray, clothing, whatever, and do tick checks when you get home from outside. And even here in the suburbs, you don't have to go into the woods. You can walk through lawn area. Usually the lawn is really cut short. You don't have that much shade because they don't like the really dry areas. They dry out really quickly, but in general, if you're out and about in natural areas or taller grass or bushes, something for protecting from ticks, this is.
I'm wondering, a number of my neighbors spray. I don't spray, but I would assume their spray comes into my yard.
It does.
Well, the spray drifts, and then the other thing is insects don't really know property lines. So
Right.
whatever insects go, and you know, some people argue that like, well, I'm not killing them, I'm not using insecticides, I'm just using repellent like the garlic spray or whatever other thing, which I think that has insecticidal qualities too. But you know, I'm just making them go away. But if you can have you make them go away, you're basically taking your yard out of the circulation. That's not the habitat anymore. And people have all these pollinator friendly flowers and other things that will attract those insects. They either get killed with the sprays or they just can't eat this stuff because they're repelling them. So it's just as, even the repellent is just as bad as killing them because you're just removing that habitat.
And you mentioned something that more aphids come, because I have a lot of aphids now.
Aphids, I had really good luck with just letting them be as long as you're, you know, not maybe like, I actually had aphids multiple years on a plum tree that I just cut down for another reason. But if I waited long enough, the ladybugs come and they take care of them. So I just kind of, are you willing to wait long enough? And do you have, if you have a population of ladybirds around, they will find it pretty quickly. There's also lacewings that are the adult, I think the larvae, the aphids. Ladybugs can eat the adults and the larvae.
So
Either.
it just occurred to me that instead of getting into these like very unpleasant conversations with the guys coming around spraying,
Yeah.
maybe like I could just go around my neighborhood, I'm in Belmont Hills, and have some kind of literature. I know Yuri Jones is making a monarch way station at the library, and just invite neighbors to say, hey, do you want to be part of it? And then just have a list of like, well, don't do these things, but instead.
I'm a big fan of education. I guess my family has educators for many generations, and I used to teach. I think that you get further by educating people about the benefits, the way you can live without controlling the mosquitoes in other ways. I think that's the thing that people don't realize, that there's other options, and they think that rightly so, they want to use their yard, they're getting eaten alive. They don't want to do it, so they find something that's quick and easy, and they buy into the narrative of those companies. If they understand, and I hear a lot of times, it's like, well, it's not killing bees because I see bees on my yard too. It's like, well, the poor thing that happened to fly in after everything else was killed might be like one, but you saw the picture of the collateral, like this is what it looks like when you really have insect. Like having one bee or even 20 or 1,000 is probably not having bees. Having bees is like you really have lots and lots. That's what a healthy habitat should look like. So if you only have here and there, especially if like the larger bees, then they probably need a larger dose to get killed or harmed. So
Right, that was my bee that went over there.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, and I feel like it's almost worse to have all these flowers attracting the bees and then getting killed. It's almost like, it feels like being a trap. So I think education and showing not pollinator gardens don't have to be really messy necessarily. I mean, as I said, you want to keep wood debris, you want to have some leaves as much as you can, but it doesn't have to be a really disorder. It's like having the leaves, but you can leave them, don't leave them where they're getting blown into the neighbor's yard because they're not gonna like it. So just kind of be neighborly and find the in-between, the gray, the nuance stuff. That's the hard thing because people tend to go like really black and white and not be willing to look at the compromises. But, and I didn't talk about neonicotinoids, but general like treat a lot of the insect problems originate from bad growing conditions. Like the plant was not selected to fit the conditions that you have on the site. So if they're struggling, like rhododendrons, azaleas get, and the pearies, they like acidic soil. If most of the soil around here is not acidic enough, they're struggling. Anything that's stressed will more likely get disease or insect, just like people. So if we can pick the right plants for the site and try to keep them happy, water when it's drought, not suffocate them in mulch, don't do them volcano mulch, then you're gonna have less. Yeah, I'm doing a class on trees, and everybody should sign up for that one. It's a mainline school night. About trees at mainline school night. So
Okay.
it's like there's still time. But and I'm not making more money for having more people show up. So you can't have one person. So, but if you can keep the plants healthy and happy, then if they're not stressed out, they're less likely going to be damaged by whether it's insects or any kind of disease. So you have less need for spraying. And spraying only when needed instead of spraying randomly. That's why I don't like the whole yard spray. Like, I don't mind if you have a state champion oak tree or whatever other tree and it's diseased. I don't have necessarily a problem with having that treated for the disease if it makes sense financially and otherwise, but spraying everything just for the fun of it doesn't make sense. Yeah, putting out signs can help.
How do you attract more ladybugs?
They come. So you could buy
Is
those
there
lady,
particular time of the year or?
the more diversity you have, so I, talk about like having different things. If, some of the pollinator friendly websites or books talk about like you have to have enough of any kind of flowers so that you don't want to plant one of each because you have to have some kind of volume to attract the any kind of pollinator, especially if it's like specific for that plant. But the more diversity you have and the healthier your environment is, the more likely you're going to have all those natural predators already around. And they move. Ladybugs can fly. You can buy ladybugs and you can buy the praying mantis. The praying mantis that they sell in whatever Arbico Organic and other places, they are the Chinese mantis, so I don't recommend buying those for insect control. Ladybugs, I'm not sure if I don't think they're native either, and they fly off. So if you buy them, it's really, it might not be worth your money. If you end up buying some because you don't trust your natural ladybugs for coming, then I was told that if you spritz around some like sugar water or other stuff because they're thirsty and hungry when they're coming out of that packaging. I have bought lacebug larvae before, but they're large and they kind of eat each other too because they don't care. They're like really just predators of all different things, and there's nothing else around them. They just but they're kind of cute. They look like alligators. They look like the ladybug larvae.
You haven't mentioned hosta. I seem to have most of my bees come from the flowers in the hostas.
I don't have hostas. I'm not a huge fan of hostas, partly because, well, they're not native.
They're not.
I have most of my plants have like most around this area have lots of deer, so hosta is a deer sound basically.
Yeah, because I get lots of bees with the
Do you know
the
what
purple
kind of bees?
flowers.
Because yeah, they might be. I would imagine that they might be bumblebees or a lot of the. Like I have clover in my lawn, and people are like, leave the dandelion this spring because that's the first flower for the bees. Like dandelions are not really great for pollinators, so that might be great for England or Europe somewhere where there's a bee specific for dandelion. It's really not doing that much for here.
Thank you.
So any kind of gardening, and I just taught a garden mid class a couple weeks, or I guess a week ago or something, and any kind of information you find, look at the source. A lot of it is spread like wildfire, and they might be accurate somewhere where it originated, but it gets spread, especially online like these days. It just, you have so much information that's inaccurate or completely false. So dandelion is not great. Clover, it's mostly visited by the honeybees. So if you have clover lawn and you like walking barefoot, that's probably not a good mix because you're gonna get stung. I mean, clover might be good for the soil for other reasons. It provides nitrogen for the soil and helps loosen the soil, but it's not good so much for pollinators. So, just these. So these are, if you want to take a picture, these are really good websites for more information. The Society Butterflies and Moth is the one that I mentioned that has lots of, you can search for specific butterflies and they would list all the different host plants so you can figure out like what to plant if you want to attract a certain butterfly. Attract the ones that live on the East Coast and not try to get something that doesn't even exist here. The wildflower.org is a really good one for finding native plants. You can search by state, by certain site conditions, wet soil, whatever, all different things. And in general, finding information from like state extensions, botanical gardens, usually state agencies, although I just saw something that was inaccurate from the Fish and Wildlife. They had something about pollinating their garden, which was kind of funny, but I just saw it earlier yesterday. And they said, put compost in the soil and turn it around. Like that's just really, certainly my soil scientist friend would really be rolling her eyes about it because you don't want to turn the soil and you don't need to add compost to everything, just let the soil be and find plants that will suit the condition that you have. So that's it. That's my email if anybody wants to contact me. I don't have time to take requests. Yes.
There's a place in media called Redbud.
Mhm.
They have a ton of
Yes.
native plants. They're a really good resource.
Yes.
And they have stuff year round.
Yeah, and they have my friend who works there, or she's still working there. The other is like in the spring, there are a lot of plant sales for all the arboretums.
Yeah.
Forest has one, Jenkins has one. The Barnes just had a flyer up and I can share it, or you probably can find it online. I think the Barnes only does it online, you have to order, or at least that's what they did during COVID. They had the online order. Tyler, Dusty,
I think
Scott.
the Schuylkill Center.
the Schuylkill
does it.
Center, Prairie Bowman, Wildflower, so pretty much I guess Philadelphia has like 32, 34 public gardens or something like that, it's counting, it's going up. So almost everybody does plant sales, so those I would recommend, and they more likely to have knowledgeable people help select things. And if you're buying things, buy more than one. Unless you buy something like B-Bomb that they'll spread like crazy, or the mountain mint that they'll, right, buying one will more than planning for it. All right, any more questions? Yeah, I have 3 books here about like insect ID. I found them fairly good. Typical